India can aspire to become a $7 trillion economy by the year 2030. Now, this is what a review by the Indian Finance Ministry has said. Our next report gets you more details.
Ahead of the interim budget, a report by India's Finance Ministry has said the country can aspire to become a $7 trillion economy by 2030. The report, titled The Indian Economy, a Review, also noted that financial year 2024 marks the third successive year of over 7% growth of the Indian economy. That too when the global economy is growing around 3%. That's not all. India is the world's third largest fintech market, and this year it overtook Hong Kong to become the world's fourth largest stock market. The report also highlighted factors that have bolstered the economy. There has been a surge in public sector expenditure in the last 10 years. The same period also witnessed a greater inclusive development and a significant reduction in unemployment. Reforms rolled out by the government helped banks strengthen their balance sheets. Investment incentives have created a startup ecosystem. Government's COVID management and robust vaccination drive helped the economy return to a high growth path. Global praise for the Indian economy in the recent times is a testament to this report. World Economic Forum President Borge Brende said that India is a 10 trillion economy in the making. According to Barclays, the country will remain the world's fastest growing economy in near term, while S&P said that India is set to overtake Japan as third largest economy by 2030. Bureau Report, DD India.
And joining me is Dr. Arvind Virmani. He is a member of Niti Aayog. For those of you who are joining us from around the world, NITI is an abbreviation for National Institution for Transforming India, and Aayog is Hindi for Commission. The Niti Aayog is the apex public policy think tank of Indian government dealing with economic policy making. Dr. Virmani is a former executive director of the International Monetary Fund and chief economic advisor to India's Ministry of Finance. Dr. Virmani, welcome to DD India. Now, first off the mark, what does India's Finance Ministry say in the report titled Indian Economy, a Review? What stood out for you in that report?
Yeah. So, from our perspective, really, the issue is how to maintain fast, inclusive growth over long periods. So, as you can see, and as your report just pointed out, that is one important focus of this review. So, there's kind of two ways to look at it for your general observer. One is in terms of the forecast, and the uncertainties around it for the next year and perhaps for the next few years. And the other is in terms of the opportunities, threats, etc., which the government policy, government actions will be addressing, have addressed and will address to make this goal come true. You mentioned some numbers, of course, numbers are part of that. So what is it? So we know that the last 2 years have been characterized by a number of shocks, risks, and great uncertainty. Of course, before that 2 years, we have pandemic, which the world shared. But despite that, we have kind of maintained, as you mentioned, a growth rate of 7% or higher. So, and it quickly, if we go back, it's really, I had projected, others had projected a growth rate of 7% plus minus over these 2 years. But then the Ukraine war happened. And then many people, including myself, reduced the forecast by 0.5. But we have been surprised, right? So my range was 6 to 7%, and as you pointed out, we've had 7.2%. So that's an interesting aspect, and I'll mention only one thing. One of the most important drivers of that was the change in the budget to increase the capital expenditures. That's been a huge driver of growth, and economic analysis has shown that's because the expenditure multiplier of the Indian government on capital expenditures is very high. It's about 2.5%. So very sound economic policies. That's the thrust of it. The second one aspect which is addressed there and is important is kind of the opportunities and threats. The biggest opportunity, and the report gives some emphasis on that, is the change in the global trading system some people call it de-globalization, de-risking, or whatever, the geopolitics and the geoeconomics, which actually, from my perspective, overall provides a great opportunity. And that opportunity in supply chains, the government has done a number of things, including the PLI, the move to make FTAs with developed countries, etc., so that we make full use of this opportunity. And then, of course, lastly, just to complete this point, is that the threats. Oil prices are always a threat, so that whole solar move is very good. There were threat of physical aggression, and the Atmanirbhar defense production is designed to address it and turn it into an opportunity.
Dr. Virmani, as a report there mentioned, the document bases its forecast on certain recent and future structural reforms. Would you like to elaborate on what those reforms are or might be going forward?
Yeah. Right. So this is something which I think is underappreciated. I have been talking about it since 2019, and a whole bunch of reforms, and they're very systematic. That is what I emphasize. After the 1991 reforms, I believe that these are the most important set of reforms. Of course, everybody has heard of IBC, GST, but after that, when the pandemic occurred, the government used it as an opportunity. So, there is this expression that don't let a crisis grow to waste. And government has systematically gone through products, factor markets, what we economists call, like labor market, capital market, etc. The report emphasizes the capital market, but it's across the board. And I'll just give, whether it's government expenditures, you name it, the government has every sector, every market, they've tried to find the where reforms are needed and do it. One important one which has already seen success is the space sector and the defense sector. So in the space sector, a whole bunch of private companies have come up which are among the best. They are competing now even with US companies. So like that, the reforms systematic across the board, filling the gaps where earlier reforms had not been adequate or not equal. And it's very clear the government recognizes, we recognize that there will have to be continuing reforms. Mm-hmm. There are areas which are not complete. We've all talked about a lot of EODB reforms have occurred, but more are needed. So like that, I'm sure that new challenges will arise and these reforms will continue, including tax reforms, for example.
Right. Dr. Virmani, the report says there is no need for an artificial fiscal stimulus to growth because the economy is in robust health. Why don't you break it down for the benefit of our viewers? What does it mean in simple terms?
Right. Yeah. Right. So in these last 4 years of continuing shocks, etc., what the approach of government has been, given the relatively high debt ratios that we have, is to do targeted interventions. So where it was very necessary, for example, providing free food for the people affected by the pandemic, the budget was very generous. But otherwise, the idea has to be to increase the quality of the budget by increasing, relative to the overall budget, the share of capital expenditures. So that has been very effective, actually so effective that for the first time, my kind of range of forecast was exceeded. As I mentioned earlier, I did not expect growth to be higher than 7%, but this stimulus which was given through the budget in terms of capital expenditures actually exceeded my expectations. I'm just saying that as a simple example.
Sure.
So I don't think that's needed anymore. I think more important to plug the gaps in the reforms. Yeah.
Also, correct me if I'm wrong, Dr. Virmani, but the report says unemployment is low and women's participation in the economy is higher than before, but there remain some challenges such as slowing trade, malnutrition, quality of education, and artificial intelligence, among others. Your thoughts on this issue?
Yeah, so there's a whole bunch of issues there. I could talk for an hour about it. Let me pick out a few. So unemployment, if we look at the PLFS, if it shows that the worker population ratio has increased between 2017-18 and the latest available estimate for 22-23. It's a trend. There are, of course, lots of fluctuations. We know we've already talked about some of the shocks which have happened. So there is a lot of fluctuation. But if you see over this 5 to 7 year period, there is a clear increase in the worker population ratio, which means that more and more people are employed, more than the people entering the workforce, so to say. That is what the worker population ratio says. The second aspect which goes with it is the wages. Some people say, okay, maybe more people are employed, but the overall wages have declined. They are worse off on average. But that's not true. So if you look at the same data and break it down by the 3 categories which I have done, as self-employed, casual labor, and salaried workers, it turns out that the self-employed, between these 2 endpoints, the wages have grown, real wages have grown the fastest, about 4%. And for casual labor, they've grown by around 3% per annum over the same period in real terms, that is deflated for inflation. It's really the salaried employees, because of all these disruptions, which have not grown so fast. And very quickly, I mean, I could go through each of them, but the female labor force, there is now a study using the PLFS by Dr. Goldar and so on, which has shown that the rural and the economic survey, the survey you mentioned, confirms this. But there's already a study which shows that women's participation has gone up quite a lot in the rural areas, surprisingly, because the males are kind of giving up these, getting work in other places, like in urban areas, etc. So migration, change in occupation, etc., is partly resulting in great opportunities. And of course, all the programs done by the government so that the women's participation has gone up. I mean, I could address each of the other issues, but it's up to you if you have the time.
Fair enough. And finally, Dr. Virmani, since we are speaking on the eve of the budget, I have to ask you this. What do you expect from the 2024 budget? Do we have a wish list?
So the way I look at the budget, you know, this will be a budget of a government which expects to be back in the government after 6 months or whatever. So it will be framed in that context, is my guess.
Okay.
So what does that mean? One, the Part A obviously will have some review of the past achievements of the government and some kind of an indication of what is likely to do, you know, over the next 5 years or so. And Part 2, I would say there's a 50-50 chance. I'm being very honest to your observers. I would say 50-50 chance. One would be kind of a routine, you know, make sure nothing is disrupted, vote on account type of budget. And the other possibility, 50%, is some real surprises which nobody has guessed.
All right, on that note, Dr. Arvind Virmani, thank you so much for joining us and sharing your thoughts and insights with our viewers at home and abroad. Thank you for your time. Appreciate it.